Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. I'm Gavin Schall. Today, I'm joined by Benjy Ritholtz of Knicks Film School to discuss Julius Randle's past, present, and future on the New York Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Knicks, and today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And if you want to become an everyday listener to Locked On Knicks and join the elite company of our everydayers, you can do so by hitting the notifications bell and the subscription button on YouTube, and be sure to do the same on your audio podcast platform of choice. But if you're looking at the screen and saying, hey, Gavin, that's not quite enough for me, well, you can take it a step further by subscribing to our Subtext. The link is in the episode description. We will send you our day-to-day thoughts on everything happening to the New York Knicks, the latest rumors, the latest news, the latest analysis, and you can respond by asking us any question you have about the Knicks or your dating life, whatever you're feeling. But I'm Gavin Schall, the guy who's going to be giving you that advice, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. And today, I'm joined by Benjy Ritholtz, who is a longtime returning guest on this podcast, a contributor for Knicks Film School. He makes incredible Twitter threads breaking down, I think, pretty much essentially each and every Knicks game and any cool trends he noticed. He is just flat out one of the smartest people who covers this team. So I'm really excited to be joined by him to discuss Julius Randle, who I think will probably be the Knicks' most important player this year, even if he's not their best. I'll explain why in just a sec on Locked On Knicks. All right, guys, as promised, oh boy, this is a great day. One of my single favorite people in the world to talk Knicks with, longtime guest on this show, fantastic contributor over at Knicks Film School, my good friend Benjy Ritholtz, and we were talking. You called him your favorite player, and definitely with zero sarcasm. Before we started this podcast, we're talking Julius Randle. Benjy, welcome back. Excited to get into it with you.
Man, excited to be here. Always good to be back with you, Gavin. Since I got started doing this, you guys have been kind enough to have me on. It's always been fun, a great conversation. You guys are so good at what you do. And Julius Randle, he is not my favorite player, but I think he's a misunderstood player to some extent and an underappreciated player at times. So I'm excited to get into the nuances and details of the enigma that is Julius Randle.
I've weirdly, I mean, obviously it's been a roller coaster. When you're doing a podcast 5 days a week, it's a roller coaster with every player, but with Julius yes. In particular. And the playoffs got a little bit toxic. And certainly on this podcast, they got a little bit toxic to Julius Randle. Then over the summer, I weirdly found myself more and more like defending the guy and being in on the guy. And I just I was going over some of the numbers last year, put up 25 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists per game. The only other players in the league to hit those marks, Joel Embiid, Giannis Antetokounmpo, two guys who finished top 3 in MVP voting. The playoffs were not as kind to Julius. 17 points, 8 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 37% from the field, 26% from 3, 71% from the foul line. And looking back on that 37% number, all I could think was, hey, he shot, I think, 29% from the field last time he was in the playoffs, something like 27% from 2-point range.
So improvement.
He's going in the right direction. It's looking better and better as time goes along. But he, you could argue some of his success last season might not be sustainable. And that's what I'm curious to get your take on first. What do you think the biggest drivers of his success were? And do you think we see them again this year?
Yeah, I do think it's sustainable. It's been a fascinating 3 years. Well, it's been 4, but in the Tibbs era, let's say 3 years that matter to me. And he has changed and evolved his game in each year, sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way. He's been asked to change his game, I think, in significant ways, and I think he doesn't get enough credit for taking that advice and implementing it, even again if the results didn't come out the way they wanted to. So like we back season, or we hear season, I should say. We hear season, right? That first Tibbs year. He becomes like this Kawhi Leonard mid-range assassin. He is in isolation. He is pivoting, posting. It's Carmelo-like almost in the way he was utilized. Then they bring in Fournier and Kemba, and they ask him to reallocate a little bit into more of a playmaker and like start becoming a hub at the elbows. And I think it really messed with him. I think that transition was difficult for him from going to like, there's no bad shot to like, I have to get others involved that we just signed to these big money contracts. And he suffered, and then it all kind of obviously spun out with the thumbs down and everything else. And he had one of his worst seasons of his career in terms of efficiency. And then I think they smartly said to him, we don't want you shooting a gazillion mid-range shots anymore. That was that one season, probably unsustainable. Like, let's chill on that. I don't think you're necessarily made to be a hub because you're not the best processor decision maker. Let's maybe not have you in that role. I want you to shoot a ton of threes, is what they said to him, right? And he did, man. He was one of the highest three-point attempt guys in the league last season. And for a person that came into the league as a non-shooter, it's pretty remarkable that we've gotten to this point. And look, he only made 35%, but 35% on that kind of volume is a helpful diet of shots, and it helps winning. It contributed obviously to a great offense. I don't see why that version of Randle, who is just kind of not hesitant from three, can probably make 35%, can make step backs, as we saw again last night, pretty consistently when they need a bailout shot, but also catch and shoot from the wings. He's going to gun away. Off of that, he can attack closeouts. We saw the dunk last night, and the ridiculous, vicious dunk that someone of his size and skill is. There just aren't that many that are capable of that kind of move with the power and the grace combination that he provides. Make your passes out of doubles, which he does pretty well. I see a sustainable model for Julius Randle that they've kind of come to after 3 years of figuring out where the best role is for this guy.
I think you just did a great job summing up the eye test of what I was seeing in stats looking at this throughout the day. He shot 55% from two last year. His first 3 years on the Knicks, he was at 46%, 47%, 51.5%. And that was kind of the sneaky thing that I didn't think I realized in the moment of the we hear year is that he was not an efficient guy inside the park, but it was in an environment where he had, it was Elfrid Payton and young RJ Barrett around him and Mitchell Robinson, and just it was a disastrous ecosystem for basically any offensive player. And he kind of did the best he could within that. And it worked because he made 40% of his threes. And that was kind of enough to buoy him to decent overall efficiency. The other kind of surprising thing I saw, his first 3 years on the Knicks, he shot 60% at the rim all 3 seasons. Again, in kind of a disastrous environment with Mitchell Robinson parked there in perpetuity. And last year he got that number all the way up to 68%. And I think part of that was maybe guys having to have longer closeouts with him shooting threes at the volume it was. And I think the bigger thing was what you just mentioned, which was just he was in easily the best shape of his career last year. I think he had twice as many dunks last season as he did the year before. The athleticism was just in kind of a different place, and it clearly showed at the rim. And his mid-range shooting shot up 9%, but I don't think he became a better shooter. It was just that he turned essentially all the long mid-range shots he was taking, which was 20% of his shot diet 2 years ago, into threes. It became just 11% of his shot diet.
Right.
3 more threes per game than he took at any single point in his career. So it was the kind of the perfect confluence of him maxing himself out physically, and then the team putting him in really good spots.
100%. I would add that he had a higher offensive rebounding percentage than he's had since he's been on the Knicks, which, I shouldn't say his first year with the Knicks again, which I'm basically discounting. He had a higher one, but he was a fierce offensive rebounder. Mitch gets all the credit, rightfully so, because Mitch might be the best in the league at it, maybe behind Steven Adams. Julius Randle was a monster. He was so physical down there. And that's, again, if you get those rebounds and putbacks, you get to the line a lot, the easy putback looks, all of that helps. It all contributes. But like you said, eliminating the long two from the diet and turning those into threes it was an extraordinarily smart pivot by both the team and by him implementing that change, and made all the difference. And I think, one thing that I don't want to underrate is, you add a guy like Jalen Brunson. Not necessarily that the chemistry between them is so obvious. It's not like a Jamal Murray-Jokic situation or anything like that, where they play some two-man game. It's okay. Neither is a great passer, so it's not like that kind of chemistry, but it's just all the attention that Jalen Brunson draws opens up things for every teammate that he has, including Julius, and just a little bit less pressure on him to create all the offense, I think, was good. His turnover percentage was down last season, I think, which was good. A little bit less dribbling into traffic, because that's something that Jalen Brunson can do for this team, with more effectiveness, and remarkably few turnovers, the way Jalen Brunson plays, right? So it's all that reallocation for the team was good, was healthy as well. I think all those factors, but I don't see something unsustainable with what we just described. I think It's imperfect. He's not a great shooter for taking that many threes, but I do think for this offense, it's healthy and good, and gets the ball out of his hands quickly. And then you allow your offensive rebounders to get in there on misses and long misses. Mitchell Robinson gets long misses as well as he gets the short misses. Like, he's just a monster. He vacuums it all up. So you want to get shots at the rim, less turnovers for him. That was the formula for this team developing into a great offense. And you spoke to his situation a couple of years ago, the We Hear season. That wasn't a good offensive team. It was a great defensive team. And that's why they were so successful. It had nothing to do with their offense. I mean, Julius carried that offense to like barely average, slightly worse than average. The defense carried that team. All of a sudden last season, this becomes a top 5 offense points per possession wise in the regular season. And this is clearly the more healthy way for him to play in a team context.
All right, guys, next with Benjy, I wanted to talk Julius Randle in the playoffs issues and how the Knicks can help themselves out. And then what would happen if he got hurt this year? But before I do that, I want to tell you about our friends over at Gametime. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices used from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive, and all-in prices show you your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal without hidden fees. You can buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. Those last 2 things are why I use Gametime. I live 12 blocks away from MSG. What I prioritize is just being able to look 30 minutes before a game and quickly get tickets and know the price I see is the price I'm ultimately going to get. But they have something that really seals it in for me, and that's Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts. It's a place to find last-minute seats. You can find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, baseball, basketball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the Gametime guarantees means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Yeah, I think that the threes are so necessary with how they structure their offense with Mitchell Robinson, because you just can't, and especially Jalen Brunson, like as clogged as the floor already is. Like, think if like Julius still wanted to be operating in the mid range, it just wouldn't be tenable. So that was in some ways a sacrifice for him, but it bettered him, and it bettered his game, and it clearly bettered the team. We're months removed from that aforementioned playoff failure, and I almost think it's been under discussed, not so much in just assessing it, but almost in what a loss that was for the Knicks from an intel gathering perspective, and just having kind of an objective view. All right, here's who this guy is in the playoffs. Because I think if he was entirely healthy and he had performed like that, maybe it wouldn't have been wise, because it's still, at the end of the day, it's a small sample size. But I think there would have been more talk of like, all right, do they have to move off this guy? Because like at a certain point, like we're going Einstein's definition of insanity, and like this is what we're going to get from him in the playoffs. And there's a absolutely cap ceiling if that's the kind of efficiency your second best player is putting out there. But because of the ankle injury, like you come out of that and you're like, did we learn anything from this? And I'm curious of your opinion on that. And what's kind of your level of optimism that like these changes we talked about in the regular season can translate into the playoffs, and translate to, even if he's not the same guy as in the regular season, something that is a facsimile of that instead of just close to a disaster.
Yeah, it's a great point you make about intelligence gathering. Obviously, most importantly from the franchise perspective, but for us analysts trying to figure out what is going on, when health becomes a very difficult variable to account for. We don't really know the extent of it. We don't know how much it affected him. We don't know what exactly it affected. We can assume, I think, based on the fact that he had surgery right soon after, that it was pretty serious and that it must have affected him in some way. Here's what I do know. If he has a weakness, it's processing. It's quick decision making. I do think he's not Joel Embiid, but like Joel Embiid, if Joel Embiid has a weakness, I think similarly, he's a meticulous player. He doesn't make the quickest decisions. He likes to hold the ball. I think those guys are going to have some trouble in the playoffs when defenses scheme, play off. Like in the regular season, the extent to which defenses play off of Mitchell Robinson and Josh Hart is just not the same. Like in the playoffs, teams pick their poison in a more deliberate way, and there's just less space for Julius. And when he doesn't make the quick decision, when those gaps do open up, he's not ready to hit it right away. I do think there's something there in terms of just somebody who will have some problems in the playoffs, dissecting, diagnosing a defense, and making the right reads. I don't see why he can't make shots, like catch and shoot threes. Like I think he can fix. It's like the possessions that drive you nuts, though. It's like the turnovers and the forced shots in the lane where he's not seeing a pass, or he never had an opportunity to see a pass because he went too quickly or didn't make a quick swing. That's the stuff that I really worry about in the playoffs with him. I don't want to say it's not fixable. I do think, though, it's a flaw in his game that he will have trouble overcoming in the playoffs. It could certainly be better than it was last season, and it could be better than it was in Atlanta. And I would expect that if they get to a similar situation, he would play better with more health and another year of experience. But I do absolutely worry that this is a player who will not reach his regular season output in the postseason.
This is a hard thing to do. And I think like when you talk about the big picture future of this team, it's kind of the point I come crashing up against at different times, where it's like, what pieces of this team can you like remove and change around and alter without destroying the fundamental identity and what makes them effective and what made them a final 8 team in the first. And I think about that in terms of Mitchell Robinson a lot, but I think it's so true for Julius. And I guess like what I'd want to know from you, like, is there a way that they can reallocate some of that decision-making without taking away Julius's shot making, which is so important for this team? And I think sometimes, because obviously Brunson is such an efficient operator and has proven himself now multiple times over to be so good in the heart of the playoffs, like it removes the fact that for a lot of last season, like Julius was their engine in some ways. And the guy who was ultimately like the higher volume player and like taking on possession after possession. As good as Brunson is, like Julius is physically built for that. Like obviously he's also taking more damage than Brunson is, but like in a way that Brunson isn't, just with his size, with his physicality, with his ability even to get up 8 threes a game. Like we haven't seen that Jalen Brunson can do that yet. He took about half as many last year, but can you like
that's what 7-8 inches do for you, right? I mean,
right.
Size matters.
Absolutely. Can he, I guess what I'm getting at is like, can he sustain like that shot volume and like be more of a finisher come playoff time, and maybe even more so in the regular season to get ready for that? And like other guys have the ball in their hands. I think that's just a very hard thing to do, because inevitably if you're a scorer, you get put into positions where you have to be a passer, especially when a defense tries to dictate that. And also outside of Jalen Brunson, it just sort of feels like, again, unless Emmanuel Quickley would play an even larger role, like there aren't a lot of other like great decision makers on the Knicks.
Yeah, I also don't really know what that looks like for this team, because, you know, as much, and the Knicks get criticized a lot for an isolation heavy offense, and it is an isolation heavy offense, but it's not like they did this in Tibbs' first year, but no longer is it just like Carmelo post-ups at the elbow. That's not what they run. I mean, they run pick and rolls usually that get switched, which end up in isolation, which you can't really do anything about. It's based on personnel and defensive personnel and how they feel like they can do that, right? So like in the Miami series, they had Jimmy Butler, let's say, on Brunson and Caleb Martin on Randle. Well, and then they just switch that action, and then you have to end up isolating off of that switch. Hard to fix, like, and you want to say like, okay, so let Julius operate from the elbows a little bit, but like again, they tried that last season or the season before last season, right? That bad season, and wasn't really effective, and he became very turnover prone. That actually puts the ball in his hands more. Like, what does it actually look like to let others? I mean, Jalen Brunson had the ball as much as anybody in the league last year in the playoffs. It's not like Julius was holding the ball a ton. I mean, Brunson had control of that whole offense basically throughout the postseason. So I don't know if it's like about taking the ball out of his hands. If he plays, he's going to get the ball in certain scenarios, and it's just about trying to be quicker in his decision making. I don't really know what the schematic change is. I mean, I think in general, the Knicks can obviously run some stuff to like open people up in more efficient ways, more off-ball screening, more movement. We've talked about all these things a million times. I'm not rejecting that. I think that's right. I just don't know how it manifests for Julius in the playoffs necessarily, and whether or not is it how much of this is coaching? How much of this is Julius needs to be better, and or Julius is going to struggle with this no matter what? Like it's a little bit of both and everything. But it's a tough thing, and like I think we've all moved to this, like, how do we make this better for the playoffs? I don't know if I struggle with this. I don't know if this team's at a point yet where we can start ignoring the regular season success essentially and like what helped them get to where they got to. And like they compiled wins in the regular season, especially after Josh Hart arrived, and like start thinking about like almost the way Milwaukee, when they had, that year they decided we need to switch more on defense in the regular season, even if it sets us back a little bit in the regular season. We know we're a contender, but we need to get more versatile defensively. Can the Knicks start making decisions like that? I don't know if we're quite there from a talent perspective. It's a really tough conference, a lot of talent in the league. Seed is not guaranteed. Like, hell, we just played the Washington Wizards in preseason. I don't think the Wizards are going to be any good. Yeah, but like Jordan Poole could freaking drop 50 on you in any game. Like, it's not going to be easy to win 45, 46 games, let alone 50. And I think the Knicks are capable of that, but a lot of that capability comes from the continuity of and the style of play that they've already established. I worry a little bit about trying to transform again and make Julius do all sorts of different things again. Like, he's already adjusted his game so many times. They found success here, some sustained success. They get to the second round of the playoffs, and now you're going to try to switch up a lot of things again. There's a balance to be struck. The offense can be a little bit more diverse, a little bit more intricate, and I don't think it's going to be, sadly. But at the same time, I understand the approach of continuity of the smash mouth basketball that they play and succeed with. I struggle with that. I don't know if I'm thinking aloud here, but I do struggle with that conversation.
All right, guys, we are going to finish up with Benjy asking a fun big picture existential question. What does Julius Randle's future ultimately look like on the New York Knicks? What does your future look like just in life in general? A bank account full of money, if you listen to my advice, and that would be using FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. I am looking at night one of the NBA season where the New York Knicks are 2.5-point underdogs against the Boston Celtics. You guys know the move. Throw some money down on the Knicks and maybe buy yourself a ticket to MSG for the next home game with the money you win. If you want to do that, visit FanDuel.com/LockedOnNBA and kick off both the NFL and NBA season the right way. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. No, I think it's a great point, and it's a bigger picture conversation, but it's how much do you take away from last year's playoff run? And we got burned during the Kemba season of like having too high expectations coming into the year based off a playoff run, and clearly a lot of that team wasn't sustainable. I don't think the same thing's going to happen this year, especially because there's so much more continuity. But you can look back at the playoff run and say Cleveland was a great matchup. Miami was an 8 seed that pulled off the upset, and like there's a tendency to look at that series, and I've certainly approached it this way at points and say, hey, like 2 of our 3 best players were hurt. Like one of them was out and one of them was playing on an ankle that required surgery after. And there's a world where the Knicks could have been in the conference finals. And like, that's true. And also in some ways that series doesn't feel like as close as it was, which was like a 6-game series that came down to 1 or 2 made shots from going to a game 7. But was it actually that close? Like those are all questions Knicks need to ask themselves when deciding how all in to go. And all I could think about while you were talking was like the clearest solution to me is just to have more shooting on the floor and make reads easier for Julius. And we saw like all play. They were like even when Quentin Grimes was like probably played or at least shot about as bad as someone who's that good of a shooter could shoot, right? Like 30, like 28, whatever he shot from free throw splits. Like they were still infinitely better when he was on the court, just having the threat of him. And I think part of that is like, that just makes Julius's life in terms of like the reads, like how comfortable teams are sending a second guy his way easier. But it's also sort of the structure of the Knicks. Like no matter what, at least right now, unless they're playing Brunson, DiVincenzo, Grimes, or Brunson quickly Grimes, which is a little smaller than Tibbs wants down the stretch of games, like that is fundamentally going to be an issue, right?
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%. And I find myself erring on the side of just do what works for this team, like that, like until we get the talent upgrade, like a massive talent upgrade.
Yeah.
Like, and this team's very talented. Don't get me wrong, but like, I personally don't think it's quite on a contender status until you get to that point. Like, this formula really worked for this team. I think they can shoot better this season, and I think we haven't even touched on the defensive side of the ball. That's, to me, the biggest change I want to see this season is Julius defending with real spirit, real effort. Schematically, I want to be more aggressive with him because I think it brings out the best in him when he switches, when he's active. I think when he plays drop, he gets lazy and the team suffers. To me, like, this team, if we can assume that there's some drop off offensively, the third in the league last year in point, let's say, I mean, I think top 10 is a good goal offensively for this team, but if they do get that drop, they need to improve the defense, which was poor. Better since Josh Hart got there, but this team needs to strive for a top 10 defense, and in order to achieve that, Julius to me was the weak point. Him and Brunson both, but Brunson more just because he's not very good at it, and Julius because he's not always willing. And I think, to me, that's the biggest change in the Knicks and Julius stylistically that I want to see. It's just a better effort consistently on the defensive end. I think that elevates the team more than any change to him specifically offensively could be. I think they maximized him in the regular season offensively. I don't know how they change that defensively. I think he can take that upon himself to be a much better player.
Yeah, that would. It's such a hard thing because it feels like so much of it is mental. I know you had the whole inertia theory with him last year, and I'm in agreement with you. Like, I would like to see more of that, and also that offers you, like, I know you said the Knicks aren't necessarily at this point yet, but potentially more scheme versatility in the playoffs if you're forced to try some of that out in the regular season. Like, do you think that's something that Tibbs is willing to do? Because it felt like, and you know this stuff a lot better than I do, but they were like pretty one note defensively last year, but I could have been missing stuff there.
I think with the starting lineup, it was basically always the same. How Tibbs schemes Julius, or whether Julius makes all of his own decisions, I still don't know. I wish I was a beat reporter. I could just ask Tibbs this question. I don't understand the reason or rhyme behind what they do with Julius defensively. He drops sometimes, he blitzes sometimes, he switches sometimes. I don't know who makes the calls. I don't know. Like, I know in the Atlanta series, for example, they made a conscious decision he's going to switch on to Trae Young every time at some point. Like, it took them a couple games. Other than that, Luka, I think they switch him pretty consistently. Like, certain guys he'll always switch on. Certain guys, like, seems random. His teammates don't always seem to know what he's going to do. They need to just kind of hammer that out, like on a base level. Like, what is he doing every game? I want it to be more aggressive. I think he's better that way. I think team's better that way. In terms of, like, the general team, I think Tibbs was a little bit more willing to change scheme last season, especially with the second unit. Hartenstein got much more aggressive at the level as the year went on. He started to blitz. Sims, when he plays, is a more versatile defender and quicker on his feet, so he can switch more liberally than the other two bigs. But with Mitch, it's pretty like a Mitch pick and roll is going to be pretty much a drop. That hasn't changed. And this is all for the Julius Randle topic, but we're talking about it. I worry about that. I think the league has gotten, and you saw it last night, man, like, Mike Muscala's out there and we just don't have an answer. Like, you get 5 out on us, Porzingis kills us. Like, You get 5 out on our team, we are just going to struggle to contain. We're so reliant on that help and drop. When the guy can't drop, it just feels like driving lanes are available, and then the center feels like he's got to get in the lane, and then Muscala is 5 for 5 from 3, and Porzingis hits 3 on us. Like, I don't know if we have a good answer to that right now. That worries me because the league is just getting more and more stretchy, shooters everywhere. You have a contender in the East now in Boston who's going to play 5 out most of the time. Milwaukee, other than Giannis, everyone's shooting. I worry about that a lot. I actually wonder if Jericho Sims is part of the solution in certain lineups when they go 5 out. Julius at the 5 is not going to happen. Maybe it would be. I don't know if that's what you were alluding to before, like, as in terms of versatility, like, could go to that. I think they only go to it when they're like down 20 for some reason. But we'll see. I think Tibbs will be more willing to change things up. It is something that I worry about, though. And in terms of Julius himself, like, they need to just figure out what he does on a possession-to-possession basis, and he needs to commit to it, just like he did on the offensive side. Like, they made a plan, he stuck to it, it got better. That needs to happen on the defensive side this year.
I know part of this question is how long, but can the Knicks survive an extended Julius Randle absence this year? Because I think that hasn't been maybe talked about enough. And to me is like the single way this season goes down is as a disaster for the Knicks. If he's out for 30 games, God forbid, at some point, like I think they're in trouble, but do you think there are solutions there?
I think it'll be tough. I'm not sure how much different it is from last season because I like Obi, and I think Obi's going to have a lot of success in the league, and he's going to have a lot of success in Indiana. He wasn't a power forward. Certainly when the Knicks were playing him, he wasn't a power forward. He was playing on the wing. He was, and that's, I think, was the logic behind the move was like, we can replace Obi Toppin masquerading as a wing with a wing in DiVincenzo. Obi's not a rebounder. Like, DiVincenzo is as good a rebounder as Obi Toppin is. A lot of there aren't that many teams that have big power forwards anymore. I mean, they exist, but like it's pretty much now like ball handler, 3 wings and a center on most teams. Yes, I think they can survive. I mean, I think the loss of the talent, their second most talented player probably will damage any team, including the Knicks. I don't think I'm not worried. I'm not that worried from a size perspective, if that's kind of what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Am I worried that Tibbs is going to then insert Jericho Sims for 20 minutes at the 4? Slightly, but we'll see.
It's almost
slightly worried.
You were. Yeah. Well, let's go even taller, baby.
Exactly.
Right.
I think you can survive with Josh Hart, RJ, even DiVincenzo with the 4. You might get hurt on the boards a little bit, but I'm just not that worried about it.
Gotcha. All right.
From the size perspective, again, losing Julius matters just because it's Julius.
Of course. All right. We'll wrap up on this. It's a big one. What do you think his long-term future on the Knicks is? Is he on a championship contending version of this team in a few years? Can he, like you mentioned, he's changed his game. He's got the first option, the second option. Can he be a third option? And that's you can bring this, I think for almost everyone not named Jalen Brunson and Quentin Grimes, and to a lesser extent, a Josh Hart or DiVincenzo, this is a question for almost everyone on the Knicks. But I think it looms larger for Randle, obviously, because at times he was last season their best player. Yeah,
it applies almost to everyone on the Knicks, maybe except for Quentin Grimes, who I could stick on any team and probably can play on a championship team. Not because he's better than those guys, but because roles matter and he can be in a KCP, Danny Green type of role and succeed, I think. The question is with Julius, I think it's going to be this is a prove it year on the defensive end for me. If you're going to be a third option, you have to guard. There is no, he's not going to be a sixth man. Sometimes you get those guys, even those guys lose playing time in the playoffs inevitably, who don't guard. He has how many more years on this extension? Remind me.
He has, I think next year is his last one.
This year and next year. So let's say that they're going to sign him to a new deal. Is going to make a whole lot of money. He's not going to take a discount again. Guarantee you that. And he switched agencies, which I think is interesting in terms of the fact that he took a discount. I don't know if he thought it was a discount at the time, but when you look at the production since, it was a discount. They got him at a really good deal, and I don't think he's going to leave any cent on the table next time around. So he's going to have to guard in order to fill any kind of role that makes sense as a third option on a championship team, I think. Especially if it's with Jalen Brunson and superstar X. He can't. Brunson's never going to be a good defender. He's going to need to be a very good defensive player, and I don't think it's out of reach. I don't. I think a lot of it is just commitment. So that's number one. I think the fact that he is now a high volume 3-point shooter allows the possibility because he can play off ball and he can hurt you from out there. And it's helpful to have that kind of power and speed on it. He's a force to be reckoned with on every possession. On the boards, he's a freaking monster. And sometimes basketball is complicated. Sometimes it's really simple. No one wants to play that guy because he can hurt you. He's scary to play against. He's a beast. So just that baseline of like super skilled, super powerful, a handful to deal with, catch and shoot 3-pointers. You just got to add the defensive element. I think then the answer is probably yes, but it's complicated. And like championship teams, there are no rules. Like they're all different, and the league changes too, right? So it's not. I don't think it's that simple ever in terms of like this works on a championship team, this doesn't work on a championship team. But I think the outline of a player exists that can be kind of a supporting piece on a championship team if he guards.
Man, given some of the lows he's had in New York, a championship period would obviously be the pinnacle. Well, you have children, but for me, the pinnacle of my life. And
No comment.
Julius being smart, probably. And you've gotten married at some point. But Julius being like a central figure in that, I think would just go down as like one of the great New York sports stories ever, and I don't think that's overstating it. And it's nice this is I think possibly the last podcast I'll record before the season starts, so I think it's a really good time for me to dream and to
yes, dream away, man. Be positive.
That would be pretty cool. Yeah,
I mean, it's not even like rags to riches. It's like rags to riches to rags to rich. Like this guy has been a freaking roller coaster.
You know what? If he has one more bad year this year, that would make it even crazier.
Yes, it would. He looks good though. I gotta say, he looks good. Like he'll make the frustrating Julius plays, like he had one last night, where it's like an easy swing to Grimes, and he somehow holds on to it, drives into two bodies, turns it over. Yeah, drives you crazy. But like, he looks good. He looks in shape. He looks strong. Shot looks good. I don't think there's any reason to think he's not gonna have another really solid year. And I expect that. And I hope, again, the buy-in comes defensively. Then that's where the big change is made. But yeah, it would be a remarkable story if he was part of the team going forward. I don't know if it's likely. It's probably less. I would say chances are he's not part of that championship future that exists out there somewhere. But it would be really cool if he was, because, man, yeah, that would be an amazing sports story and a roller coaster ride for sure with Julius Randle.
All right. On that very, very happy note, Benjy Ritholtz, thank you so much for your time. Before I let you go, can you tell everyone where they can find? I was negligent. I didn't.
No, not at all.
Work you do on Twitter threads at the beginning of the episode. I will mention in the pre-episode part that I haven't recorded yet. And of course, everything you do with Knicks Film School. But can you let everyone know where they can find all of that?
I appreciate that, man. It's Ben Ritholtz NBA is my Twitter handle or X handle. You can find basically everything that I do there. I'm on the Knicks Film School. I do a lot of podcasts there with my friend DJ Zula. We have one. I don't know what it's going to be, once every couple of weeks or something, once a month. I don't know exactly. I'm on with Macri here and there. You'll find me on that channel a lot, and hopefully coming on Locked On every once in a while too, to check in and see how we're doing. So I'm looking forward to that.
And whenever you want, man. And anyone who listens to this knows that DJ does an incredible job as well. So that is an absolute dream team. And it's a good time to mention we have a crossover with Knicks Film School dropping tomorrow, assuming I end up putting
sweet.
Monday. Right. So that'll be a lot of fun. Our annual bold predictions, which I hope you'll be in on next year, Benjy, is that we can turn a 3-hour podcast into a 5-hour podcast. And that would just be a blast. But until then, he's Benjy. I'm Gavin. We will talk to you very soon on Locked On Knicks.
Bye, guys.